Good morning. It's Monday, the 10th of February. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast coming to you from ARIRANG's news centre in Seoul. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. A 4-day-long snowstorm drops over 1 metre of snow on Korea's eastern coastal regions, marooning mountainous villages and blocking traffic in affected areas. More snow is expected throughout the week. A delegation from a South Korean consortium will visit North Korea this week for a field trip on a joint railway project between Pyongyang and Moscow. Plus, Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency agree on a 7-step process aimed at easing concerns over Tehran's nuclear program. We start with the latest on the heavy snow that has blanketed parts of the country. Snow reaching up to an adult's hips fell in some parts of Korea's eastern coastal regions over the weekend. Fortunately, no deaths or serious injuries have been reported, but the sheer amount of snow is a major inconvenience to local residents. Kwon So-ah has the latest.
Silent, but enormous. Over 1 meter of snow has piled up over the last 5 days in parts of Korea's eastern coastal regions. Currently, there are heavy snow advisories and warnings in effect in most coastal areas of Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, and also in parts of Gyeongsang-nam-do province further south. So far, the biggest accumulation has been recorded in Gangwon province's Jinburyong and Mishiryong, which both received around 110 centimeters, and over 100 centimeters has fallen in Gangneung. The snow has caused widespread damage and inconvenience to local residents. Mountainous areas have been blocked off and traffic is being restricted. More than 40 schools will be closed on Monday, while around a dozen have postponed entrance and graduation ceremonies. Numerous facilities, especially greenhouses, have collapsed under the sheer weight of the snow.
The tomatoes have all gone bad. Even if new tomatoes sprout in this cold, it'll be impossible to restore the greenhouse and get them growing as before.
While residents are busy shoving snow off their cars and homes, government officials, police, and the military are helping out in the affected regions. Korea isn't the only country in the region under a thick blanket of snow. A snowstorm hit Japan over the weekend, resulting in 11 deaths in 8 regions, most related in vehicle accidents. Well over 1,000 people were injured. The first heavy snow warning in 13 years was issued in Tokyo as 27 centimeters accumulated, the most in almost half a century. Public transportation services were paralyzed, including at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, where along with the snow, gusty winds blew at up to 75 kilometers an hour. As the low-pressure system is expected to move away from Japan, Korea's eastern coastal regions are forecast to see more snow throughout the week. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
A delegation from a South Korean consortium will visit North Korea this week for a field study on a joint railway project between Pyongyang and Moscow. Watchers say that although North Korea continues to call on Seoul to hold its upcoming joint military drills with Washington, there are signs Pyongyang wants to try and get along. Connie Kim reports.
The South Korean delegation's visit to the north comes amid steadily increasing hopes once chilly ties between the Koreas are beginning to warm. A South Korean government official said Sunday that 18 officials from the state-run rail operator Korail, steelmaker POSCO, and Hyundai Merchant Marine will visit North Korea's northeastern port city of Najin for a field study for 3 days from Tuesday. The South Korean consortium will fly to North Korea from Vladivostok with Russian officials also taking part in the project. The envisioned 54-kilometer railway line will run between the Russian border town of Hasan and the North Korean port city of Najin. South Korea's involvement represents part of President Park Geun-hye's push to link energy and logistics infrastructure across the continent. She agreed to support the joint railway project during summit talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Seoul in November last year. The North's recent peace offensive comes despite Pyongyang's recent call on Seoul to halt its upcoming joint military drills with the U.S. North Korea issued a statement last Thursday saying that reconciliation and provocations cannot coexist, using the example of the upcoming inter-Korean family reunions, which are due to start next week, and the drills which Pyongyang says are practice for war. Amid the slow warming of ties, the two Koreas also agreed last Friday to establish an internet network at the joint Kaesong Industrial Complex. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Pyongyang has reportedly rejected Washington's offer to send its envoy to win the release of Korean-American Kenneth Bae, who was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in North Korea for supposedly trying to topple the regime. Citing sources in both the US and the North, Japan's Kyodo News says Pyongyang has called off US human rights envoy Robert King's scheduled visit Monday to hold talks about granting amnesty to Bae. Last Friday, another Japan-based media outlet reported on King's expected visit. Through an interview with the detained American, the US State Department only went as far to say that it had offered King's visit a long time ago. Pyongyang had previously cancelled King's visit in August of last year after Washington decided to deploy nuclear-capable bombers during military drills with Seoul. This week's interpellation session at Korea's National Assembly looks set to be overshadowed by the acquittal late last week of the former Seoul police chief, who was suspected of obstructing a police probe into a high-profile election scandal, Shin Se-min reports.
The presidential election meddling scandal, which had dropped out of the limelight in recent weeks, has re-emerged as a burning issue following the acquittal last Thursday of former Seoul police chief Kim Yong-pan. Kim was charged with scaling back and whitewashing the results of a police investigation into allegations of state meddling in the 2012 presidential campaign. The main opposition Democratic Party is furious and is demanding key figures in President Park's cabinet resign and a parliamentary probe be launched into the case. The ruling Saenuri Party says it's not open to launching an investigation into the matter. With the interpellation session kicking off on Monday, the National Assembly is expected to be locked in a political standoff with the Democratic Party demanding an investigation into the acquittal. The Democratic Party has also submitted motions to dismiss Minister of Justice Hwang Kyo-an for his role in the state probe into the government agency's alleged interference in the 2012 presidential election. The Democratic Party has also submitted motions to dismiss the Minister of Justice Hwang Kyo-an for his role in the state probe into the government agency's alleged interference in the 2012 presidential election. The party is also demanding dismissal of the Minister of Education's Son Nam-soo for defending right-wing high school history textbooks. The party is also planning on submitting another motion for the dismissal of Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Hyun Oh-seok as a government investigation on the biggest personal information leak in the nation's history comes to an end. Prime Minister Chung Oh-won and cabinet members will be in attendance for foreign, unification, and national security interpellation sessions. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The Korean government and the country's two main political parties have begun discussions on how to implement President Park Geun-hye's basic pension program, one of the cornerstones of her election campaign pledge. Citing the need to maintain fiscal soundness and lower the financial burden, the welfare minister and two ruling party lawmakers said 70% of the lowest income bracket aged 65 and older should be given up to $185 a month, depending on the period of their national pension membership. The two opposition lawmakers, on the other hand, said President Park should pay 80% of the lowest income bracket the full $185 a month without any conditions. The involved parties plan to reach a deal by next Thursday and to pass a related bill during this month's parliamentary session. Former Japanese Health Minister Yoichi Masuzo has been elected governor of Tokyo, easily beating his two nearest rivals who said Japan could do without nuclear energy. Masuzo, who was heavily supported by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe throughout the campaign, was declared the victor in exit polls on public broadcaster NHK minutes after voting closed on Sunday. The ballot was widely seen as a test of Japan's public opinion on atomic power, as the two defeated candidates had vowed to end the country's reliance on nuclear power in the wake of the Fukushima nuclear disaster. In a victory speech, Masuzo stressed that Tokyo needs electricity, saying that while the Fukushima disaster was devastating, Japan had to reduce its dependence on nuclear power gradually. And a former Japanese prime minister who apologized for Japan's colonization and wartime atrocities against Korea will visit Seoul this week. Representative Jong Jin-soo of Korea's minor opposition Justice Party confirmed on Sunday that Tomiichi Murayama will be arriving for a 3-day visit on Tuesday and that he intends to meet with President Park Geun-hye. The presidential office in South Korea has yet to confirm the two will meet, but watchers say a meeting could serve to ease territorial and historical tensions between the two countries. Attention is also focused on whether Murayama will convey current Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's position to President Park. During his trip, Murayama will speak at the National Assembly on Korea-Japan relations on Wednesday and will meet with Lee Hee-ho, the wife of late President Kim Dae-jung, on the last day of his trip. Iran has agreed to take further steps over the next 3 months to ease fears over its nuclear program. The deal, reached between Tehran and the International Atomic Energy Agency on Sunday, lays out several practical measures, but does not include a visit to the Parchin military site, which the West and Israel suspect has been used as a nuclear bomb testing site. Kim Min-ji reports.
Iran has agreed to take more steps to diffuse international concern over its nuclear program. After 2 days of technical talks in Tehran, Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency reached an agreement Sunday on 7 practical measures to be implemented by May 15th. Among the new measures aimed at enhancing transparency over Iran's nuclear motives and suspicions of its past work on atomic weapons, Iran has promised to provide information about why it wants to develop detonators. The IAEA is probing into possible military elements to Tehran's nuclear work, something Iran has denied. Iran will also provide managed access to the Sakhan uranium mine in Yazd, which is believed to produce some 60 tons of powdered uranium a year. Other steps include providing information and managed access to the Ardakan concentration plant and following the IAEA safety recommendations for the IR-40 reactor, which is capable of producing plutonium. The deal, however, does not permit inspections of the Parchin military site, which has long been suspected of being a nuclear bomb testing site. The latest development comes as Iran is set to return to the negotiating table for talks with the P5+1 nations of the US, Russia, China, France, Britain and Germany this month to strike a permanent nuclear agreement, following the framework for cooperation that was agreed between the parties in November last year. Under that deal, Tehran promised to cease all enrichment above 5%, neutralize its stockpile near 20%, and give greater access to nuclear inspectors in exchange for relief from partial economic sanctions. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
At least 600 people, mostly women and children, were allowed to leave the besieged Syrian city of Homs on Sunday, escaping from hunger and isolation for the first time in more than a year. The Syrian government and rebel forces agreed on a 3-day humanitarian pause that began last Friday. The United Nations and the Syrian Red Crescent carried out the evacuation operations. Humanitarian workers also succeeded in delivering aid to parts of the city, despite the threat of mortar attacks and gunfire. Authorities said 250 food packages, 190 hygiene kits and medicine made it inside. Voters in Switzerland have narrowly backed a referendum proposal to reintroduce strict immigration quotas with the European Union. Swiss television reported Sunday that 50.3% backed the so-called Stop Mass Immigration initiative. It also won the required majority approval in more than half of Swiss cantons or regions. The outcome obliges the government to make the initiative, spearheaded by the right-wing Swiss People's Party, into law. While Switzerland is not part of the EU, its immigration policy is based on free movement of people to and from the EU, as well as allowing in a restricted number of non-EU citizens. The result could hurt Switzerland's ties with Brussels and jeopardize a number of bilateral accords. Now, in some welcome health news, US research has shown high doses of vitamin C can improve the cancer-killing effect of chemotherapy in the lab and mice. Scientists at the University of Kansas say that, given by injection, vitamin C could potentially be a safe, effective and low-cost treatment for ovarian and other cancers. They've called for the US government to launch large-scale clinical trials. Vitamin C has long been used as an alternative therapy for cancer. The team behind the research also say patients reported fewer side effects when given vitamin C alongside chemotherapy. Now, if you're tired, like pretty much everyone, of receiving spam and suspicious text messages on your cell phone, you may be in luck. Mobile carriers and internet firms here in Korea have released a host of smart applications that identify and block fraudulent texts and calls. Our Son Jung-in reports.
Many SMS messages these days include online links or other attachments that can be opened with a single touch. However, upon closer inspection, this particular text message installs malicious software on your phone, which can steal your personal information and even make illegal charges. In order to combat these so-called phishing attacks, local wireless carriers have released free smartphone applications that alert users of suspicious phone numbers and texts. These new apps are increasingly effective as they leverage a huge database, which is constantly updated by millions of users who report spam messages.
This application is very convenient when I receive messages or invitations for things like birthdays. It helps me filter them, so I'm able to trust the mobile texts that I get from acquaintances.
Other smartphone services notify you of incoming calls from telemarketers and corporate call centers. The Smarter Caller ID allows you to see comments and ratings by other people who are also called by the same number.
Through these call information services, we've identified large inconveniences and come up with various improvements. We hope to further improve customer services with these calling services.
The demand for such services has risen sharply in light of Korea's massive credit data leak and the evolving nature of high-tech financial crimes. And although these innovative apps don't represent the final solution, they're helping to protect consumers one call at a time. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And time now to check in on the weather conditions in Korea and around the world. And that's all for now. Thanks ever so much for joining us. We'll be back at noon Korea time, but in the meantime, you can always catch up with what's been happening on our website, which can be found at arirang.co.kr/news.